Good evening and welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, show dedicated to discussions on all things humanism and or from the humanist perspective. This show is brought to you by volunteers from FreeThought Fort Wayne. My name is Caleb Tittman. I'm joined today by Dee. How you doing, Dee?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
And Dee and I are joined by a very special guest today. We're humbled to have him on the show. A man named Anthony Magnabosco.
Hey, fellas. How's it going?
Excellent.
I'm doing great. So happy to have you on our show. I only recently learned about this Street Epistemology movement. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience who you are and just give a brief story of how you got to where you are today, essentially, and what Street Epistemology is?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate being able to talk about Street Epistemology because I honestly think it's one of the best things that we as atheists have going for us as far as making a real difference in the world. So I guess maybe just to take a step back, I am an agnostic atheist. I'm also a skeptic. I would probably describe myself as a secular American. I think finding truth is very important. I always wanted to do something with the atheist movement. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do until I read a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists by Dr. Peter Boghossian. And in the book, he talks about this method called street epistemology. And it's a dialectical approach to having conversations with people that helps them think about how they form their belief in a way that doesn't make them defensive. So they'll be more open to thinking about, how did I form this belief? Why do I think it's true? And the very process of engaging with a person in that kind of friendly Socratic approach oftentimes not only helps them better understand what they believe, but it will oftentimes cause them to lower their confidence in the belief. Now, when I first read that, being a skeptic, I thought, yeah, right. Like this just it seems too good to be true, until I started going out and doing it and having conversations with people and just starting up conversations with total strangers and recording the results for about 3 years. And as I had more and more talks and started engaging with other people who were having these types of conversations, and even Dr. Boghossian himself, who would give me advice, I found that the talks were becoming increasingly effective, and people were, within 5 to 10 minutes, were lowering their confidence in these deeply held beliefs.
That's quite the feat for 5 minutes of time.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, to kind of summarize what you're saying is you're using a Socratic approach to conversation to sort of plant the seeds of doubt in somebody who's, say, using faith as the foundation for their belief.
That's one way of putting it, although having had hundreds of conversations with people, not everyone, well, number one, not everyone believes in a God. So I've used street epistemology with atheists who are confident that there's no God and there's no faith involved in that approach. So what we're finding is that while the book was primarily geared to inspire atheists to have conversations, friendly conversations with believers who are usually basing their beliefs on faith, what we're finding is that regardless of the belief that a person holds, I really can't imagine any topic that would be off limits to street epistemology. So when the book first came out, it was geared towards atheists. It was geared towards having more productive conversations with believers and helping a person possibly realize that faith is not reliable. But we're starting to see from other people that are doing this that it just seems quite versatile and can be used for pretty much any belief.
I was going to ask you, do you do this type of thing with politics? That would be the next thing that comes to my mind as something that we, believe in as a matter of faith a lot of times.
I've dabbled in politics a little bit. I've had most of the conversations that I have, I record them with my GoPro and I upload them to my YouTube channel, and I initiate the talks. Now, sometimes I find myself engaged in conversations with people that just happen organically, and some of them happen over social media. I have had a few people talk with me about political beliefs, and I'll use the same methods of street epistemology. So I had a back and forth conversation with a woman over Twitter who was certain that Obama was a dictator who would not leave office once his term was up. And the exchange was so fascinating, I ended up turning it into a video so that, because I think people are, very few people read these days. I think they would much rather listen to a podcast or watch a video or listen to a video. So yes, I have had a few discussions, but not as many as I would really like. I think there's a huge untapped potential for street epistemology. Mm-hmm. There's probably somebody listening to this right now thinking, how can I put a spin on SE or street epistemology and do something different? Yeah, go to a Trump rally, go to a Bernie Sanders rally, or maybe something along those lines now that the election is over. Like, yeah, I think these beliefs, these political beliefs, can be challenged just like the religious ones. I think there are probably some differences there, but I think it's a huge untapped market. There's a huge untapped opportunity, I think, for going after those types of beliefs.
Watching a lot of your videos, and from my own history, which was religious, and then I, quote unquote, kind of woke up over several years. One of the biggest things that I've looked back on and was a real realization to me that I was doing was black and white thinking. And I just really see a lot of that in the people that you're interviewing. And I see that a lot with people who call themselves atheists or skeptics. They still are trapped in a lot of black and white thinking. Would you say that has any semblance of truth to it?
That's a really good question, Dee. I do think that the more fundamental a person is, whether they're absolutely certain there is no God or they're absolutely certain there is a God, those folks, and I'm stereotyping, but those folks do tend to be a little bit more dogmatic and black and white in their thinking than people who are more in the center of that range, where they might be 80% sure a God exists or 20% sure that there is no God. And that's what I find so interesting about this approach, is that what I'm realizing is that the goal may not necessarily be to help somebody completely abandon a belief, but to help them step away from being so rigid about their position on the belief. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's where I think the real disconnect here is that humans tend to get so locked into their beliefs, it becomes a part of their identity. And when you're so confident that you're correct, regardless of the belief, that's where I think the danger can happen to your relationships and to humanity as a whole.
I totally agree with that. And I find that even amongst atheists, skeptics, or I don't know, that if you were to ask them if they believe that there is no God, and you put it on a scale of 0 to 100, I've never done this before, but I'm pretty sure I would get a lot of 100% answers. And I'm often puzzled by how that's any different than religion.
Well, I think if you were to ask them a few more questions, they might suddenly realize that it's not a tenable position.
Sure.
I do find that more atheists seem to be more, I guess they're more willing to shift a little bit on their certainty than a theist might be on the God claim. And it might just be because of there's the penalties associated with it, whether it's socially or if you believe in the mysticism of it. The neat thing about SE, though, is that it tries to create an environment where people are more willing to analyze their beliefs and possibly shift on it. And that's what I love about the technique. It just seems like it's so honest. And if you yourself are not willing to change your mind when questioning somebody about something, I don't see how you can sincerely go out and start using SE. So I am an atheist, but if I was 100% certain there's no God, which I'm not, I really don't think that I could be effective in conducting SE. Just like we have so many theists now that are seeing the videos and they're going out to do Jesus street epistemology or Allah street epistemology. They're like, at first they would critique it. Like, look at this. This is so disingenuous. They're trying to trick them with all these questions. And that was like back in 2013. And then like by 2015, The message has kind of changed to the point of hey, we can go out and do street epistemology for Jesus. But I don't see how a person could honestly do that if they're trying to promote a position. Neutrality is such a huge part of this approach.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me, I watched a video that you had posted a while back where there was these apologists who were critiquing your work, essentially complaining more than anything about the simple fact that what you're doing is changing minds without even, quote unquote, presenting an argument, end quote. And do you think that perhaps maybe these pods that you were just talking about, is that maybe you think a retaliation of sorts?
Yeah, so there have been some apologists that have watched the videos. They've showed them to their congregation and church to say, look at what's going on here. They're trying to trick us. They're trying to confuse us. They're trying to destroy our worldview, something like that. It's really fascinating to see the concern, but I think it's all stemming from a misunderstanding of what it is we're trying to do. I personally am not trying to completely dismantle a person's belief system, but I am hoping that they will think about the conversation, and I do hope to leave them with a little bit of doubt so that they will think about why they hold a belief and possibly come to realize that they're holding it for a poor reason and, possibly just abandon the belief. It's interesting, like watching these apologists warn their flock to, in some cases, I've had religious people say, religious leaders on a college campus, for example, it seemed like he was suggesting to his flock to avoid speaking with me. It disturbs me, because I think if your belief can stand up to the scrutiny, you should never be afraid to have a conversation about why you believe it or how you concluded that it's true. So I am just fascinated by the response that street epistemology is being received by the atheist community. That's a whole nother topic. But the theistic community that is seeing it, and I think they're worried about it, because you're right, we're not presenting an argument. We're not presenting them with facts. We are asking people questions to help them explain to myself or whoever's in the conversation,
yeah, sure.
Why they believe it.
Do you mind if we talk about the technique a little bit more? I mean, obviously.
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, because when I tried to explain this to, say, coworkers, because I'm very proud of what I do, and when I was explaining that I was going to be having Anthony Magnabosco on my show and we're going to be talking about street epistemology, I was doing my best to try and explain what street epistemology is, and usually I would start with something along the lines of, so he's using a Socratic method to get you to evaluate how reliable the methods you use to understand what you believe are actually true or not. And for whatever reason, everyone kept asking me, so does that essentially mean he just keeps asking you, well, how do you know? Well, how do you know? Kind of like Psi 10?
Well, I would, yeah, I'm familiar with that kind of back and forth. And there was one time where I just went out and I just kept asking, how do you know? How do you know? There's probably, well, there are some quicker ways to end a conversation, but that is a fairly quick way to end a talk with a believer, because they will just throw up their arms and be frustrated. So, no, I wouldn't recommend just constantly pummeling with somebody with how do you know and acting like a 5-year-old. I truly want to understand how you come to believe it. So you really want to kind of go where they take you. And if somebody says that I believe it because it's written in the Bible, well, I'm not going to say, well, how do you know that? I might say, well, why do you think the Bible's true? And they might come back and say, well, because of all the prophecy that's in the book. I'm not going to say, well, how do you know that? I might say something like, how did you conclude that the prophecies are accurate? Or did human beings have access to the prophecies? Well, yes, they did. How would a person go about determining that the prophecies were actually being carried out by a God as opposed to people who wanted the prophecies to come true? So it's kind of a custom-tailored approach on the spot, whether you're doing it face-to-face or it's an online type of thing. Frustrating somebody or being a pest or having a conversation with somebody who doesn't even want to have the conversation, that's not going to be effective. That's not going to help anybody. you really just want to go where the person takes you, and hopefully they will be open to examining their belief.
So when I was involved with my Christian church as a younger man, we used to do a lot of outreach, knock on doors, go to stores and try to strike up casual conversations with people in an attempt to, get them to come to our church. We used to call those people apostles. And you seem to be like the apostle for atheism almost.
Well, let me make a distinction here before you get to. Oh, do you want to finish your question? Because I just love to jump on that.
Well, no, go right ahead. I can continue with the rest of it later, but I'd love to hear your response.
Okay, so in a way, I am evangelizing or being an apostle, but I think it's for this method. Okay, so I want as many people in the world to be familiar with street epistemology and use it. I don't care what you believe, because I think the method in itself is so important that we should all be using it. So if I'm an apostle or an evangelizer for anything, I think it's for promoting the method. Now,
sure.
Do I think the world would be better if people didn't believe in any gods? I think, yeah. I think the majority of the population, would be better off if the majority didn't believe in things that are unjustifiable. Am I proselytizing for atheism? Not necessarily. I like to think of it as trying to promote an honest search for truth. So that might be a distinction without a difference. I'm not sure, but I'm just so excited about the method and how effective it seems to be in helping people re-examine their beliefs. And like we said before at the start, like, it doesn't have to be about God.
Well, I guess that leads to my next question is, and I don't think there's any answer to this, but you have a belief that if the vast majority of humankind were to use this method in analyzing our beliefs, that we'd be better off. But there's a lot of people that seem to really rely on the crutch of their superstitions just to get by. And I'm also wondering if everybody's even capable of doing this. I'm not 100% sure that we are. Does it require a certain amount of education, a certain amount of history and thinking things through in your mind? I'm just curious what your perspective might be on those.
That's a real good question, too. This method may not be for everybody. Number one, let me just clear it up that you don't have to initiate the talks with strangers in public with a camera.
Sure.
So you can just wait for these things to happen organically and have the talk. But even still, there are some people that are completely competent in having a conversation using street epistemology, and they're on an airplane and they're presented with the perfect opportunity. Somebody makes a comment about reality, all right, and they just decline to do it. That's fine. One thing that we've learned by having these conversations and more people doing it is that we recognize that we need to have two willing parties, not only the person that has the belief, but the person that might be questioning why the person has the belief or how they form the belief. So yeah, we do recognize that this isn't for everybody. I just made a tweet about this, I think, recently. For the people who would never feel comfortable engaging with a believer about their belief using street epistemology, that's fine. Try supporting us some other way. So share a video with a notable atheist who might be able to promote it even further, or offer to translate into a different language, or if you're good with graphic design or there's some other skill that you have that you can help us with, help us in that way. But it's not for everybody. There are some people who just don't like talking to other people, or there are some people that are still in that angry atheist phase and they just want to lash out at believers rather than help them. If you're not interested in helping people, if you'd rather tear a person down, stay away from the method. The best thing, I think, would be just to just not engage with somebody until you're ready to want to help somebody.
Yeah, the last thing you want is the method itself to be demonized.
Oh yeah, and there's nothing stopping anybody right now from grabbing a camera or starting a conversation without a camera and say, I'm going to go out and do street epistemology and start arguing with somebody on the street corner, and calling it SE. That is a risk that we face. But I think we've reached the point now where folks like yourself, you're noticing the videos, you're being blown away by what you're seeing, and you're starting to realize, wow, there is really something different here.
Absolutely, man. I have to say, I've been kind of obsessed with this street epistemology movement. I very likely might, in the future, become one of those people that does go out there and try to have these conversations. But, I've noticed the biggest impact for me personally in using these methods is actually coming from home. When I talk to relatives, I recently just got into a long 3-day conversation with my cousin, and it was essentially about religion and faith and a little politics mixed in. And I realized I was using your method, and the conversation was going exactly how I wanted it to go. I've been conversing with this guy. We've always butted heads. He's the complete polar opposite of me. And every time we ever had a conversation, it turned into a confrontation. But, I was using your methods just kind of instinctively, because I've been using it on public forums or, at work, and I decided I'd try it out.
Good for you, Caleb.
Oh, thank you. And I decided I'd try it out with family to see if it would make a difference, because I do know that there's a difference between talking with friends and people over the internet and family. And I've already noticed a huge difference. The conversation is controlled and calm, and we're actually making progress, And furthermore, I'm willing to admit sometimes that he does have me on some things every once in a while. But the bright side being, I have him on a lot more things, and he's willing to admit it because he's going through that process of figuring it out for himself, and he can't really deny any facts because, like you said, he uses as few facts as possible. I just asked him to evaluate his position, and it's wonderful, and I love what you're doing. I just wanted to put in my own little anecdote.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited to hear that, because that's very similar to my experiences too. That the person that I'm speaking with tends to have a greater respect for me by the end of the talk, and vice versa. They tend to have a better understanding of what they believe, and I have a better understanding of what they believe. People observing the conversation, I don't know if this happened in your situation, but typically if this is on a Facebook page or something and people butt out and let you actually have your conversation, it's so easy to get derailed by other people objecting and throwing in like the old way of talking to believers. But oftentimes people watching your exchange I've had people private message me and say, whoa, I really never expected that person to admit that. I've been talking to them for 5 years and they've never budged on that belief at all. So the potential for this is great, not only for the person you're speaking with, but the observers and even yourself.
I kind of want to focus a little bit because we don't have a lot of time to explain what street epistemology is, but I've noticed that one of the key factors here is, we've touched on this just recently, is using as few facts as possible. And I was wondering if you might mind explaining the reason why.
Sure. You would think that it would be counterintuitive that if I want to change a person's mind or help them realize that they're holding a belief that's not true, well, I'm a rational person. If I was presented with facts to show that paper bags are better for the environment than plastic, well, I'll change my mind. Or I think that a particular deity exists, right? Like, just show me the facts and I might change my mind. Or my position on global warming or something like that. But there's a lot of research going into this, and there's even more today than there was 5 years ago when Boghossian wrote his book. That people tend to believe what they believe even when they're presented with facts that contradict their position. It's something called the backfire effect. So while you would think presenting a person with data to show that they were mistaken would change their mind, it doesn't usually work that way, especially when we're talking about sensitive, identity-inspired beliefs that, sure, if you show me data about whether paper bags are better than plastic, I'll probably change my mind on that because I'm not all that invested in it. But if you're challenging a core belief that I have with regard to reality, and it's something that I've been believing for a very long time, showing me facts that make me look like I was wrong all that time are only going to cause me to believe in what I believe even more and completely discount your facts. So the nice thing about street epistemology is that we're not presenting facts. We're simply asking questions about how you form the belief. And that Socratic back and forth, that conversation of asking, that approach of asking questions, listening, repeating back, making sure I understand, rephrasing it, digging deeper, those are the behaviors that tend to elicit that moment of reflection where a person says, you know what? I've never really thought about it. I really don't know. And for somebody to admit that, even after a short amount of time, is just fantastic to watch.
Anthony, do you have any interesting like success stories, I guess you would call them? People maybe you've spoken to that have gotten back in touch with you later and maybe thanked you, or you really woke them up, possibly?
Yeah, so I have had people reach out to me, not only folks that I have spoken with on camera, where 2 years later I received a message from a fellow that said, I don't know if you remember me, we talked on a campus, I was a Christian back then, and I just wanted to let you know that I no longer believe that.
Wow.
So getting messages like that, I'd say I probably received a dozen or so messages from people on a variety of beliefs. We're not just talking God beliefs, but on karma, or whether I think ghosts exist, or I'm a superstitious person and now I'm no longer superstitious. Another aspect, because I upload the videos, I'm being contacted by atheists who are watching it, and just like Caleb was explaining, that it's changing the way that they're having conversations with people. But believers are watching the conversations, and this is the coolest thing. Like, a Christian will watch me have a conversation with a Muslim who's using the exact same arguments that they would use to justify their belief.
Right.
And they're listening to this Muslim give the exact same reasons, the exact same method they use to conclude a completely different belief is true. And then they're thinking about it and saying, you know what, Anthony, I watched one video, I watched 5 more, and I'm pretty sure I'm agnostic now, or I'm pretty sure that I can no longer believe in this God. Now, where do I go for resources? That type of thing. So.
Wow.
Those are encouraging. I mean, you want to talk about motivation. Being contacted out of the blue by somebody that across the world that watched the video and is now different, is extremely motivating.
That's pretty awesome. That's quite the notch on your belt, or notches, to be able to do that kind of stuff and say you did it, or were a part of it at least. A lot of the people that I run into, or in my close circle of friends and family, they have some familiarity with my particular beliefs now and know that I'm active. But a lot of people, like my family, for instance, the door to even allow information that would inspire any sort of doubt is totally closed off. Like, we can't even go that direction. And, I think, I'm assuming that...
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. I've tried to get around it as best I can, but anytime a question or any kind of comment that comes up that would require any kind of critical thinking comes up that may pertain to a belief, the door just slams shut. So there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, but is it any belief, D, or is it just the more sensitive God belief?
Well, the things I guess that I think that come up the most would be politics and religion, I guess. I don't know of other topics that come up for sure that have the same sort of faith-based type of thinking, but I'm certainly open to suggestions.
But here, yeah, I'd like to offer a suggestion to not only you but to the audience that, and this comes up every once in a while, where, Anthony, I want to talk to my family about God, why they still believe in it, but it's such a taboo topic, and everyone just gets nervous, and it's awkward, and we start fighting, or we fought in the past, and there's no way I'd bring it up again. My recommendation there is find a different claim to engage with them on, and it could be something as simple as, hey, do you want to order pizza tonight? Sure, let's call Mario's Pizza. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure Mario's Pizza is closed tonight. Well, you can engage with them on that claim. Well, why do you think that that's the case? You can start with something as innocuous as that.
That's hilarious.
And work your. And so there's just 2 sides of this. So when you do that enough, okay, I want to go out and buy a red car because I heard that they get, less speeding tickets or something, or more. I don't know. Whenever they make a claim, I'm not going to get a red car because I think they get more speed tickets. That is a perfect opportunity to engage with them in a friendly conversation. You can even say, I listened to this radio broadcast, or I watched this video, and this guy asks, whenever somebody makes a claim, he asks these questions. Do you mind if can we just do a little role play on your belief and make a fun thing? If you do that enough with these other beliefs, I'm I'm optimistic that the person will ultimately start performing it on their own beliefs, performing it even on those deeply held ones.
That's really interesting. I'm assuming some of the people that you attempt to talk to, is there a certain percentage of people that you attempt to interview that once they realize what you're doing, that just can't handle it and walk away? Do those videos make it to YouTube?
I haven't uploaded anything like that because I don't think I have an example of it.
Really?
Honestly,
wow.
Yeah. I try to be upfront with people with what's going on, and I think I almost over disclose. So some people, I get feedback on the videos that I've been uploading. People say, well, you should really be a little bit more upfront about what you're doing. So I'll say, okay, I want to have a discussion about a deeply held belief, and sometimes by the end of even a 5-minute talk, you might be less confident, more confident, just as confident that the belief is true. Well, wouldn't you know it, the second I started doing that, people started adding comments to the effect of, well, I think you're kind of priming them for change by warning them that they're going to change.
Right.
So there's certain things that I don't know. I try to find a balance between giving them a heads up of what's going on, but also not to the point where I'm scaring them.
Sure.
But I don't think I've ever had. I mean, I guess I've had some people where the conversation went off the rails, but it was probably because I was just ham-handed in my response, or I didn't pick up on the fact that maybe I was making them uncomfortable or something. But I think those examples are few and far between. Most always people greatly enjoy the talk. They do want to speak again. They email me after the fact. They commend me for what I'm doing and say, that was the coolest conversation I've ever had. I need to learn more about this so that I can talk to my wife about this next time. That type of stuff. This would be a great time to talk about the importance of pausing so that people have time to think about the answers to the questions that I do ask them, because I don't want to ask a question and stump a person, like to the point where they're just like, and then I don't want to shut anyone down. I want to open people up. I want to help them think about this belief formation process. And rushing somebody or forcing them to give an answer right away and let me hit you with another question, that's counterproductive. So one thing that I think most people that watch the videos would probably take away is how slow the talks are. Like they're actually almost boring. Like if you're looking for a brawl, you're going to probably be disappointed watching these videos. But if you're interested in watching two humans effectively communicate on a sensitive topic in a way that could have a profound impact on both parties, then you have to check out these conversations. And they're not just mine. There are other people that are uploading videos too. This is growing.
Obviously, you take a more diplomatic approach talking to theists, but I'm curious how you view, what's your take on the more firebrand individuals, such as like Aaron Ra or TJ from The Amazing Atheist, or somebody who's really out there and in your face?
Okay, so I do think that there are theists who will stumble across an aggressive firebrand video and be blown away by it and completely reevaluate how they form their belief, possibly to the point of even abandoning their belief. I've met atheists that have said that they've watched an Aaron Ra video or a Matt Dillahunty or Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens, and they change their mind. So no, I think that that approach has its place. I'm not proposing or being a proponent of street epistemology to replace that approach. I'm hoping to complement it. In fact, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. I think street epistemology might be great for, I'm going to use like a kind of a suggestive analogy here, but like street epistemology might be great foreplay for the actual hard conversation where you're discussing facts. Because and maybe that more firebrand approach. The firebrand approach often includes hitting somebody over the head with facts that contradict their position. There are people that can watch that and they're watching a video and they're distanced from it, it's not them in that position, and they can see that and they can change their mind. But typically, if they're in a one-on-one talk and somebody's hitting them over the head with facts, they're going to experience that backfire effect. However, even if I were to engage with somebody using street epistemology, we just start this topic, and I think at some point, the conversation will probably have to pivot to the person saying, okay, I now realize that I'm basing this belief on faith. I think it's pretty much coming down to my understanding that evolution is not true. And if it could really be shown to my satisfaction that evolution is true, yeah, I think I could become an atheist. At that point, then it's time to shift gears and start presenting facts. But bottom line, I think both approaches have their place. They have their right venue. And it's important to assess the situation and see where a person is so that you can custom tailor your approach.
That's a wonderful response. I've actually been kind of debating this topic amongst my friends. The way you articulate that is spectacular. I want to thank you for that.
I've had a lot of time to think about it. I mean, I think about this stuff all the time, Caleb. Like, I'm just so excited by it because I see the huge potential that it can have, and so yeah, I tend to give a lot of thought to it, and that is a concern. That there's a lot of people that, like, I actually went out and did street epistemology with Aaron Ra, and I think a lot of people were concerned that I was attempting to change him when they themselves are now atheists because of the work that he's done. And I want to be very clear that this street epistemology approach is a complement. It's another tool in your arsenal.
It's also just, like, to me, like a critical part of just being alive. I'm amazed that the skill isn't taught to our children.
It needs to be.
Yes,
it needs to be.
But the problem is that it directly undercuts superstition. And so you can't allow this kind of thinking in school if you want to maintain these superstitions. For the most part, I would think that would be a major drawback. My wife is a teacher, and we talk about, why is critical thinking not like top priority in schools? I just can't figure out why it is.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's. I think, and I don't want to get all conspiracy theory here, but I do think that that once people recognize that if you teach critical thinking, and or if you hold off on teaching kids superstitions or beliefs based on faith until they're 12, for example, we're going to be a secular society. Okay, and I think people are threatened by that. A lot of people think that you cannot be moral without a God belief, and they're frightened by it. Which is one of the reasons why I think if you're an atheist and you can be out, please be out. Because I think the more people that see that, hey, the guy living next door to me is an atheist and he's a good guy and he's got kids, and hey, I'm going to invite his daughter to babysit for my kids, and no, they had a great time. Like that's so very important. But yeah, this should be taught. I'm actually part of a team where we're developing a curriculum for universities, high schools, and possibly even grade schools. We're designing it in a way where it's written for I don't know, 5th grade reading level or whatever, to teach this method. And again, this isn't solely about teaching people critical thinking so they can disabuse people of their faith-based beliefs.
Sure.
We're approaching it from an aspect of how do we arrive at truths. Do you want to live in a world where people believe true things? If you were believing something that's not true, would you want to know about it? And that's the approach that I think we need to take. But yes, I think the people that are, maybe they prefer a theocracy, or they think that America is a Christian nation and they want to maintain that stranglehold of power, critical thinking is a threat to that, and this approach is a threat to that.
Which is funny to me because it's critical thinking that's brought us all of the modern world, yet it can't be applied to things like religion. For some reason. Yeah, like religion is off limits, and forget that. Like,
these beliefs have profound effects. And here's the other important point I want to make sure I convey. If you watch the videos or you watch other people doing these conversations, one thing that I hope you walk away from it is that they're very polite, they're respectful, they typically end on good terms. So you should never feel uncomfortable about engaging with a person about their deeply held belief, and you can use the gentle approach of street epistemology because it is respectful, because it is sincere, and it's generally authentic. And I think that's a powerful combination. There's really no excuse these days, other than I just don't feel comfortable doing it. There's really no excuse these days to not want to engage with somebody using this approach.
I agree. It's very impressive watching you do the stuff you do. You can tell it's been refined over the years.
It's been an evolutionary process. When I first started going out and doing it, it was horrible. Like I really, I had an inkling of what I should be doing, but it was so tempting. Like, how can I pass up somebody saying that the Earth was 6,000 years old without explaining to them how stupid they are? Well, everything goes off the rails then. Right. So, if you do want to see those examples, they're out there. But no, the approach has been refined to the point where it's so cool, guys. Like, somebody will watch 10 of my videos, go out and have a conversation, and be light years ahead of where I was a year after I even started doing it. So they're just completely leaping ahead. And then they're able to show other people it, and then somebody does a podcast on it, and we're really gaining momentum here.
That's not, well. Obviously, you have a lot of practice at this. I'm kind of curious. I mean, have you ever get any really, really interesting ones, like say somebody who's a Scientologist, or perhaps somebody who's transgender, who is trying to explain why they think that they really are a woman and should be able to use the woman's restroom, sort of a thing.
I don't think I've ever had those examples. As much as I would love to have a talk with Scientologists, I just don't think we have many here. The conversations, I tend to just say, hey, pick any topic, we'll talk about it. So I have had people, I had a lady talk about how, because she was in the military, she felt that burning a flag was wrong. Or I talked to a guy who was certain that he saw a ghost. I mean, we talk about all sorts of. One guy wanted to talk about the economic difference between Mexico and the United States. So some of them get a little unusual. And I try to do my best. What I found though is that it's the supernatural stuff. It's the I avoid black cats, or I smudge, like I burn ashes and then spread them around to ward off the evil spirits. Or all these things, or even the Gabalies. Those are the fun. I just enjoy those the most.
What about aliens? You ever had one on aliens?
Yeah. I met a woman who I think she was 100% certain that aliens existed. And I mean, 5 minutes later, she self-reported she was about 80% certain. And then I think she emailed me the next day to say how much she enjoyed the talk. I think this is largely about, we talked about that dogmatism, that recognizing that, if I want to be honest with myself and with the people in my lives, can I really say that I'm absolutely 100% sure that something is true? When you really think about it, and if I'm really being honest with myself now, I just can't do it. And that sincerity, that recognition that maybe I'm not right on this, maybe I could be wrong, I am willing to change my mind. All those things I think are just good for humanity overall.
Couldn't agree more, man.
You say that this is kind of a movement that's starting to take on more energy amongst other people. Is there kind of like a unofficial group of street epistemologists that you hang out with?
Okay, so well, yeah, we share war stories. There is a great group on the. It is a movement in a way. We're really shifting, I think, the discussion in the atheist movement, for one thing. I think I'm noticing a lot of prominent atheists starting to use street epistemology, and I scream out loud and cheer when I see it. There is the streetepistemology.com website that has links to everything. The best thing right now is the private Street Epistemology Facebook group. There's over 2,000 people in there. We're having all sorts of great discussions and sharing ideas. And, hey, I asked this question, but they came back with this. And what do you think I could have done better? So there's this whole community of people trying to make it better and grow it. And that's so exciting to see.
And I've had a lot of conversations with people about, like, how do you get the word out? How do you challenge people's beliefs? And, the only examples I could ever come up with were ones that the churches use, but it just seemed odd going door to door and asking people if they had heard the bad news yet.
There's a side effort going on that I just learned about probably within the last year called Deep Canvassing, where it's primarily in the LGBTQ community, and they're literally going door to door. They have a lot more money behind their effort, and they're doing research on it. They're recording the conversations, they're analyzing them, they're doing all these statistics on it, they're doing follow-up interviews and all this stuff, and they're having some amazing success. And there are some parallels between the SE approach and what they're doing, this deep canvassing thing. I don't know of anyone going door to door and doing street epistemology. I just tend to lurk like on a college campus or at the entrance to a walking trail. Or I've stood outside the Alamo, for example, where tourists come, and that type of stuff. You don't. Gosh, I just want to make sure it's very clear. You don't have to be initiating these talks or doing any of the things. You can
Sure.
wait for these things to happen. I know of a few people that they've set up a table on a hiking trail with a sign that says, something to the effect of, "How do we determine what's true?" They ask some sort of probing question, and then they engage the person. Ideally, I think, though, these are tools that need to be taught at a very early age. We should be doing this with our kids.
Yeah.
When our kids say that they want to get a new dog, that's a great topic to start using SE on.
So
Yeah.
with I'm curious at this point. You said that the canvassing method is well funded and there's some research going into it. Is there any sort of equivalent to that with SE? I mean, is there any real way to measure how successful this movement actually is, or the state of the movement as it stands?
Yeah, well, I guess you can measure it in terms of like the number of people who have signed up to be on Bogosian's list of 10,000, or the number of people in the group. I suppose you can look at it that way. There does seem to be more people talking about it. There's more interest. I think we're very close to breaking out of this sort of atheist bubble, so that people can, understand that these can be used for all different types of belief, like politics, like we talked about. I think there is no funding behind this. This is all a volunteer effort, which is kind of discouraging, because I really do think if somebody were to fund us and we can start putting some research behind it, we can have PhDs study this and study not only the growth of the movement, but the effectiveness of the approach. And maybe I'm doing something that's not quite as effective if somebody else, the fellow that's doing this over in Paris, France, for example. So yeah, I mean, if we had money, I think we could really blow it out. The Atheist Alliance of America is an atheist organization that's been around, I think, for closing in on 50 years. They have now recognized the importance of SE, and they're getting behind it. They brought me on to lead their SE division. So I think that there is a movement to try to get this out in front of more people. But right now it's all volunteer based.
I don't know. I actually do find that encouraging because, like I said, I didn't even know this thing existed 3 months ago. And, come to find out that there are thousands of people out there willing to participate and willing to proselytize for the movement of SE specifically. So what are your personal goals for the future of street epistemology? Where do you see the state of SE in, say, 10 years?
Wow. That's a great question. Well, I think I would be disappointed if it was still an atheist thing, for one thing. We have to break beyond atheism. In fact, it might be holding us back. We've been plugging away at this since 2013, and I'm baffled by the resistance. Maybe resistance is a bad word, because when people hear about it, they're excited about it. But this doesn't seem to be growing as fast as I would have anticipated. Think about it. Like, people are literally lowering their confidence in a belief after a short amount of time. And that's, I mean, who else is doing that? So we need to move beyond atheism.
You might actually be lower on the totem pole of undesirable people. You're a street epistemologist? Oh, I can't hang out with you. I'm going to go hang out with my atheist friends.
I don't know. I was really discouraged when the Dawkins Foundation made a post about one of my videos 2 years or so ago. And I was like, oh, I was so excited, until I read the comments about, this is just so disingenuous. We're just as bad as them. We're proselytizing for atheism. This is horrible. And I was like, they're just not getting it. They're not getting what it is we're really trying to do here. What else would I like to see? I would like to see people doing research on it. I would love it if a PhD student or somebody getting their master's degree or somebody in psychology or whatever jumped on this. We want people to start studying it, to probe it, to see if we're helping people, if we're harming people, if we're being less effective than we think we are. If we're causing harm, we want to stop. So I would love to see some actual. I'm a skeptic, right? I want to see data. I want to know if this is working or not. It seems to be, but the examples that I upload to YouTube are not scientific in any way.
So street epistemology is relatively new for me as well. But what is the history of it? Like, it's called the Socratic method, but it seems like relatively new information for me and a lot of people, like this particular method. Is this where are its roots, or is it just common sense logic sort of stuff?
Well, the roots do come from Socrates, where he would engage with people about, well, what is virtue? And he would have these conversations with folks. Peter Boghossian, who wrote the book A Manual for Creating Atheists, is a philosophy professor, so he's well versed in the Socratic method. He has expertise in critical thinking and teaching critical thinking, motivational interviewing, and he started recognizing as an atheist that he could see what was happening in the landscape, that people didn't seem to be really reflecting on their belief formation process. And he was familiar with the backfire effect. And that's where street epistemology comes from, that recognition that we just seem to be spinning our wheels when we disagree on a truth claim. And he set out to find a better way of doing it. And I think I've helped popularize it, and other people are doing it too, where we have lots of examples where it seems to be working. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm so excited to see where it's going to go. I hope I'm around for 10 years to see where this method is going. I think it has a bright future.
I agree with you. One more question for you. What do you have any insights on raising children to be more capable of doing this sort of thing as they grow up? You mentioned, a small example earlier, but any other little tips or thoughts you may have on how to help children grow up with good heads on their shoulders?
Oh, sure. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Camp Quest. It's a free thinking camp. It teaches your kids how to critically think. They have camps all over the United States. That is a great resource for kids. I think modeling the behavior that you would want them to use. So when they ask you something and you don't know the answer to it, don't pretend that you do. Be honest with them and say, I don't know. Let's look it up. Let's work together to figure it out. And then encourage that when you see that they're doing that in return. Prepare them for the conversations that they're going to have with other kids, where they'll make a claim about reality, that you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in my God, Johnny. You should prepare them for those types of conversations. And they don't have to be brawls. They don't have to be debates. They could be respectful dialogues. And I don't think it's ever too early to teach a child how to critically think or ask respectful questions.
Yeah, I agree. I've got two children. One of them just wants to believe anything, and the other one is a little more interested in making up her own opinions. But I'm struggling with the one who wants to believe anything, on how to teach her how to not just rely on her parents. But I know that's a healthy part of growing up as a child, to trust your parents. So I don't want to kill that in her too early. But I also want to lay the foundation for good thinking skills. And with no training in that myself, it's been I've had to self-educate myself on that.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between teaching your kids to respect your adults and the parents, but you don't want to get so I run into so many kids being in the South, being in Texas, where yes sir, yes ma'am, they just defer to authority. And while it seems on the surface respectful and kind of cute, but when you really think about it, they're being taught to accept an adult just because of their age, and not of the merits of their argument. So I think it's important to teach a foundation of, yes, you want to be respectful to people, but you don't have to just believe something because the person that tells it to you is older. And it's okay to respectfully ask a person, how did you come to that conclusion?
Anthony, we're running up against the clock here. How can we get in touch with you? You mentioned an app, Caleb. What's that app called? Anthony, can you fill us in?
Yeah. There's an app called Atheos, which Peter Boghossian wrote. I had the opportunity of being able to help on a team that put that together. So you can learn how to use street epistemology without having to engage with people, either online or face-to-face. You can just boot up the app and learn it yourself. That is a wonderful app. You can find the link to the private Street Epistemology Facebook group, the app, and countless, but lots of other resources related to street epistemology from streetepistemology.com. And my YouTube channel is Magnabosco210, and you can find me or chat with me on Twitter at Magnabosco.
It's been a real pleasure, Anthony. Real interesting. Thanks for giving us your time. Thanks for all you're doing to educate humanity.
Thank you, D. I really appreciate speaking with you. Those great questions, and Caleb, thank you again for all the behind-the-scenes work to set us up. I know we had a lot of emails going back and forth to make sure we got it right.
No, thank you for hanging in there, man.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. Like I said, I love spreading the word about it, and if we can get it, get this concept in front of a few more people, then some good has been done.
You've convinced me, man. I'll do my best.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Really nice talking with you guys.
Yeah, you too, Anthony. Take care and good luck up there.
Okay, thank you.